What is up, creators? This is Tom. I have a budget camera. I have a budget lens. You know what that means? It's time for another Budget Wednesday. So what is up, creators? This is Tom. Welcome back to another Budget Wednesday. If you don't know, this is the show where we go through a budget piece of photography or filmmaking gear, or discuss some type of tip to bring your photography or videography up another level. If that sounds like something you're interested in, hit subscribe so you don't miss any future uploads. Today we are continuing our content on the Canon M50. This is a relatively affordable camera. You can pick it up for around about the $600 mark, similar price here in the UK. And this is the Canon 50mm f1.8 STM, super affordable lens, around about £150, $150. This video aside, you should definitely pick this lens up if you haven't already for your Canon camera, but also, you know, any other system. A 50mm lens is probably one of the most important investments, and they're super affordable, so definitely pick up a 50mm. But what I wanted to see is if we could pair this lens with this camera, what type of level of content can we go and produce? So I hit up my friend Basil. He's an amazing model near where I live. So we decided to go on a shoot, start creating some content. We didn't really have a plan in terms of what we wanted to go and shoot, but we just kept it nice and sort of lifestyle-y, the type of thing you might shoot if you were hired by a fashion brand or a lifestyle brand. And the sort of aim was to get a bunch of sort of Instagram style, but professional level content, something which, again, a brand like that could post it on their feed nice and comfortably. So first of all, I want to talk about the sort of quality of the stills that we were able to get from this setup. Then we'll talk about the gear briefly, why I decided to go with a 50mm, that type of thing. And then we'll talk about some tips and tricks that you can use on pretty much any camera setup, but particularly, you know, a budget camera setup to bring your photos to the next level. So first of all, how did the photos go? Like overall, how happy was I with the quality out of this camera? And I have to say, really happy. Like, it's certainly not up to par with something like the EOS R, which are like a much more professional stills camera, but I think it is really important nowadays to remember that a lot of media is consumed on phones, on, you know, like small little tiny screens like this. And you don't need a crazy high resolution, massively detailed image on phone screens this size. So like I said, with this combination, like the photos were really good. They're decently detailed, and the raw files do allow me to have a sort of decent amount of creative control when editing those photos as well. I think another really nice thing with the Canon M50 is you are getting the benefit of Canon's colors, which are exceptional. Like, they're pretty much my favorite colors out of like any camera brand that I've used personally. I think they have really good skin tones, and just they make sort of really nice natural looking stills. The raw files are decent as well in terms of file size. Every single photo I believe is 6,000 pixels by 4,000 pixels, and it comes out as a raw file of about 16 megabytes, which again is not close in terms of like the EOS R, which I believe they're sort of like more like 45 megabyte files, but you are getting a decent amount of detail. And I'll show you some before and afters of like some of the photo edits, so you can mess around with these, can recover your shadows in quite a lot of these photos. You're not getting quite as much editing control as you might get on something a bit more professional, but you are getting a decent amount of control to be able to edit the photos and files. In terms of overall as to how I think this combination performed, I actually think that this camera is like a perfect camera for someone who is starting out in professional photography or videography. Yeah, it's a bit like my review of the Canon 90D, which was sat in a similar sort of vein. Like, I wouldn't have wanted to do really professional jobs, something which the quality is extremely important. But if you are just looking to maybe sort of like reach out to some brands in your local area, some cafes, or maybe like a band or something like that, and just go and shoot some social media content and get the ball rolling with maybe some professional photography, this is like the perfect camera to go and do that for. Okay, so now briefly let's talk about the lens. This is the 50mm f1.8 STM, as I have said. Why did I choose 50mm? Why did I choose this lens particular to demonstrate these stills on this camera? So first of all is that it's cheap. This is a Budget Wednesday. I wanted to test a sort of budget camera with a budget lens. Next is that it's extremely versatile. So the 50mm focal length is pretty much like what the human eye sees in terms of an equivalent. So things like faces and shapes. You're not going to be getting a lot of distortion, a bit like on a wide angle lens. Things look a bit weird because that's not how the eye is used to seeing things. But it means that you can sort of capture life in what it looks like in like close to what the human's eye would expect. So that means basically you can do wides, you can do close-ups. I absolutely love to shoot from like a low down angle when I'm shooting particularly models, because it means that you are getting quite a cool dynamic photo. The subject is large in the frame and looking down on the camera, so that gives them a sense of authority as well. Again, that's sort of one of my favorite ways of shooting models, and this focal length is just allows you to do that. Like, it's a little bit close in because of the crop on the Canon M50 as well, so you're getting more like a 75mm equivalent field of view, but you can just about get those sort of angles, and you can also go punch in and go for something, you know, a bit more like portrait style, close up on the face, just something which is a little bit more sort of in line with normal portrait work. Next is that it's a fast lens, so this is an f1.8, has an f1.8 aperture, which means that it's great in low light. You'll be able to get some really nice depth of field, so nice background blur. I didn't want to use this on all of the photos, but for certain situations it's really good. For instance, this one where we were like in the car park underneath and we had the lights in the background. This is the perfect sort of photo to get some nice shallow depth of field on. And then also I want this video to be relatable and people to understand you know, the quality you can get out of a little camera like this, and lots of people have this lens. It is extremely popular for the reasons that I've talked about, so it's extremely relatable. Okay, so now let's go on to some thoughts and some tips as to how you can get sort of better photos out of really any camera setup, but particularly, you know, on a budget camera setup where you are trying to get the most out of the gear that you have. First of all, we've talked about it before, is shooting raw. Like, I think this is essential pretty much for a camera like this. You want to get the biggest opportunity to create something great, and half of sort of taking great photos is editing them. Shoot raw, give yourself that extra detail. Like I said, the Canon M50 does shoot raw files. Take advantage of that and ensure you are shooting raw. Get creative with your angles. We've discussed that before. These sort of low down shots, or, you know, maybe you're like, I have a shot in this sort of car park here. Just sort of think outside the box in terms of your composition. Think about your lighting, and luckily, like yesterday was overcast where I live, so the photo shoot was able to be shot nice and outside, and we didn't need to worry about lighting too much because the cloud cover was creating a nice even light. But maybe shoot towards the end of the day where you're going to get better, nice, sort of more even lighting. And then also, I think we get super caught up in thinking about like what camera and lenses we're using, but actually think about your composition. If you're shooting a model, think about what outfits they're wearing. How can you sort of get them to pop in the frame? Think about the pose they're doing, that type of thing. Think outside the box in terms of your photo, and think past your camera in terms of your gear. There we go, guys. I hope you enjoyed those tips and some thoughts on the camera and getting the most out of a budget camera system. If you do have any questions or comments, drop them in the comment section down below. I'll be down there answering as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.